If you think this is just another routine transfer portal update, slow down for a second. Because what happened here isn't just about one player choosing to go elsewhere. It's about a signal, a quiet message, and a reminder that the transfer portal is becoming far more ruthless, especially for big programs like Texas. On Tuesday, the news became official. Jake Garnera is not coming to Austin after entering the transfer portal as soon as the winter window opened, visiting Texas and being viewed as a legitimate offensive line target. Garnera announced that he would instead return to Michigan. And just like that, another important name came off the board. But before anyone shrugs this off as part of the portal, it's worth asking a deeper question, because this decision says much more about stability, timing, and leverage than it does about talent evaluation. Garnera entered the portal at a very specific moment. This winter cycle has been defined by players who aren't chasing chaos. They're chasing certainty, and that shift matters. He took the visit. He listened to the pitch. The interest from Texas was real. But on the other side, Michigan offered something incredibly difficult to compete with: continuity, familiar coaches, a known system, a development path he already trusted. Add in the influence of Kyle Whittingham's hiring, and suddenly the equation changed. What might have looked like a clean break turned into a calculated decision to stay put. And that raises an uncomfortable but important question. Did Texas lose the player? Or did Texas lose to the idea of security? Because the resources are there. The exposure is there. The opportunity is there. What's harder to sell in today's portal landscape is certainty. Before we go any further, tap that like button. Not for hype, but because these behind-the-scenes decisions quietly shape entire seasons. Now, let's talk about the ripple effects. With Garnera off the table, Texas immediately shifts its focus to Andrew Sprague, an offensive tackle transferring from Michigan who also visited the 40 acres recently. A Kansas City native, a player with upside, a player Texas clearly values. But here's the complication: Missouri is heavily involved. That changes the dynamics completely. This is no longer a head-to-head battle with Michigan. It's a recruitment where regional comfort and long-term stability could once again tilt the scales. Then there's Wesley King the Frowami. King was the third offensive lineman Texas hosted that same weekend. While Garnera was still available, King wasn't the primary option. But now, the board tightens, priorities shift, and suddenly, players who were once secondary options become central pieces. This is how the portal reshapes strategy in real time. One decision alters the board alters the plan, and the plan affects development timelines. And none of that shows up in a headline. What makes Garnera's decision even more telling is what it signals to other players watching from the outside. Because players talk, agents talk, families talk. And the message here is simple: moving isn't always the smartest move. For years, the portal was seen as an escape hatch, a chance to reset. But now, it's becoming a marketplace where risk is carefully weighed. And when a player believes his best option is staying where he is, that says a lot about the current climate. Texas didn't get rejected because it lacked appeal. Texas lost a battle where familiarity and trust carried more weight than upside. And that's a reality big programs are going to face more often. In the next block, we're going to break down what this means moving forward, not just for the offensive line, but for how Texas approaches the portal as a whole. Because moments like this don't just affect one offseason. Make sure you're subscribed and notifications are on. These are the stories that shape the future long before kickoff. Now, here's the part that really matters, and the part that doesn't show up in recruiting rankings or portal trackers. Jake Garnera choosing to return to Michigan isn't just about Texas missing out on one offensive lineman. It's about how the transfer portal itself is evolving, and how programs like Texas are being forced to adapt in real time. For years, the logic was simple. If a player entered the portal, it usually meant one thing he wanted: ouchie. A new role, a bigger stage, a fresh start. Programs with money, facilities, and exposure had a built-in advantage. That's no longer the case. What we're seeing now, especially in this winter window, is a growing number of players choosing continuity over change. They're asking different questions. Where do I already know the system? Where do I trust the development staff? Where am I least likely to get lost in the shuffle? And in Garnera's case, Michigan checked those boxes better than Texas did. That doesn't mean Texas failed. It means the rules of the game are changing. And that's what makes this situation uncomfortable for big programs. Because Texas did what it was supposed to do. They identified the need. They targeted the player early. They brought him to campus. They made their pitch. Yet in the end, familiarity won. And that forces an important question. How do you sell the unknown when the player already has a stable environment that he trusts? This is where the ripple effects start to matter. With Garnera off the board, the focus naturally shifts to Andrew Sprague, another Michigan transfer, another recent visitor, another lineman with legitimate upside. But this recruitment comes with its own complications. Missouri is heavily involved, regional comfort matters. And again, stability becomes a major factor. Then there's Wesley King from Wyoming, a name that wasn't at the very top of the list while Garnera was still in play, but now becomes far more relevant. And that's how the portal can quietly reshape a board overnight. One decision forces a pivot. One pivot affects depth planning. Depth planning affects development timelines. And suddenly, what looks like one missed target starts to stretch much further into the future. This is also why moments like this matter beyond one position group. The offensive line is built on chemistry, trust, reps together. You don't just plug and play without consequences. So when Texas has to reshuffle its approach, that has downstream effects, not just for next season, but for how the staff evaluates portal priorities moving forward. And here's the uncomfortable truth that fans don't always want to hear. The transfer portal doesn't reward desperation. It rewards clarity. Players can sense when they're a long-term plan versus a short-term fix. They know when they're being sold on opportunity versus security. And in this case, Garnera clearly felt that staying put was the smarter move for his career. That doesn't make Texas weaker overnight, but it does expose a reality that's becoming harder to ignore. Big programs no longer win portal battles simply by being big. They win by showing stability, clear development paths, and minimal risk. If you're still with me, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Because these are the kinds of stories that don't trend on game day, but they shape the program long before kickoff. Looking ahead, Texas still has options. The staff isn't scrambling. This isn't a crisis, but it is a signal. A signal that the portal era is entering a more mature phase. A signal that players are thinking 2 and 3 steps ahead. And a signal that recruiting, even through the portal, is becoming less about flash and more about trust. The Gijnus, Texas is just the challenge. Everyone else is adjusting too. And that's why decisions like this one matter. So now I want to hear from you. Do you see this as a missed opportunity? Or as a natural part of a smarter, more cautious transfer market? Should Texas lean harder into portal aggression or focus even more on internal development and continuity? Drop your thoughts in the comments. If this breakdown added context you hadn't considered, leave a like. It helps the channel more than you think. And as always, we'll keep tracking what happens next. Because in today's college football landscape, the moves you don't make can be just as important as the ones you do.